Everybody to another episode. It's been a little bit of a while. We had a good episode last time here with Matthew Lang here back in Columbus, Georgia. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody. Matthew, a lot has happened since the last episode. November, the college football playoff. We're going to get into that. It's going to be a lot of fun stuff. We want to thank you for watching today. If you're watching it live on Facebook, if you're catching the recap on Facebook or on YouTube, or if you're traveling by car to some of your holiday destinations and listening to it on audio at SoundCloud or iTunes. I want to thank you for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe as well. Also, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything, make sure to comment down in the Facebook live feed, and we will try to answer your questions as well about anything we're talking about today. It's all college football. So, Matthew, we're going to get started. College football season officially, regular season over, ended last weekend with Army-Navy game. Really kind of the pinnacle of a season. Love watching that game. You know, Allies has a bigger meaning than just football, and it was a good game, and Army's on a roll right now. But as we enter bowl season, which starts Friday, December 15th, with kind of those lower tier group of 5 bowls, a lot happened with the conference championship weekend for us to look and see, wow, here's a bunch of teams that are, 1 through 6, we talked about this before the show, 1 and 2 is dominant. Alabama, Clemson, 2 dominant programs. You expected to see them there.
Right.
But 3 through 6, you could honestly say any of those teams can beat each other on a neutral field. What do you think the committee got right or wrong on your aspect?
I think they did they put the 4 most deserving teams in the playoff, and I think they wanted to stay away from all the political bias, conference bias, and they went with a team in Oklahoma who is not a bad team. I think they're a very good team. But I think they strayed away from, okay, let's put the 4 best teams. Instead, they went with the 4 most deserving teams. So, and you can go about, different aspects. Okay, well, Georgia had a blowout loss to LSU, so that's probably what put Oklahoma over the hump with Georgia having that loss. But I guess what I just don't understand is why Georgia would go from 5-4 the weekend before the conference championship, play the number 1 team in the country, and play them better than anyone has in the country, and they lose a game in the last minute where they've had to lead the entire game. They lose in the last minute of the game. They, fight till the very end, and it's the most viewed game all year, probably the best game, all year, barring the 7 overtime game between LSU and A&M. But I just don't understand how you can penalize a team for playing the number 1 team in the country, playing them that well, and say, okay, you're going to go back down to number 5, and we're going to move Oklahoma up for beating a team that they lost to earlier in the season. And like I said, Oklahoma is not a bad team.
No.
I think they're a phenomenal team. I just don't understand how you can penalize Georgia for playing the number 1 team and then moving them back down. That's just my opinion. But
I think when you look at it, Oklahoma has a dynamic offense. You can say Kyler Murray can probably play with any defense out there. I mean, he's that talented. And I think it's going to be an interesting matchup between him and Alabama and those 2 dynamic quarterbacks. My problem with it is Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a team to me that Ian Book brings a whole new dynamic to that team. And I think that Brandon Wimbush did not. And so give them credit. They did what they had to do with their schedule. Yeah. But I think you're penalizing a Georgia team that had to play a conference title game. So what happens if Alabama would have lost that game? See, to me, there's no way a committee could look in the face of the camera and say, Alabama's not one of the 4 best teams if Alabama does lose an SEC championship. Notre Dame got rewarded for not playing a conference championship game, which was just another opportunity to hurt. And so I agree with you. Take away the 20-point loss to LSU for Georgia.
I think they definitely could have said.
Different conversation. If you take away Oklahoma's loss to Texas, they're definitely in no question about it. Oklahoma did, this is what a lot of Oklahoma fans feel as well, kind of vindicate that loss. They lost in the regular season, then come back and beat them in the conference championship. And Kyler Murray played great in that game. And I think it's going to be an exciting matchup to watch Oklahoma-Alabama face off. I mean, that's 2. I mean, you have the Heisman Trophy winner, and wow, I don't even know how narrow the votes were between Tua and Kyler Murray. But that's 2 of the best players in the country right there going at it, and that's going to be fun. But on the other side, you have Clemson and Notre Dame, and I'm telling you, I mean, Georgia fans wanted to be in it. Ohio State fans wanted to be in it. Yeah. We talked about this before. Ohio State, I don't care what you do. Ohio State, you lost by 29 points to Purdue, who you mentioned lost to Akron. Yeah. No disrespect to Akron fans or Purdue fans, but to be in that top 4, you can't lose games like that. It doesn't matter if you win your conference. And I put this out on Twitter when during the conference championship weekend, to me, the playoffs should not be the top 4 conference champions. It should be the top 4 teams in the country. And I think that definitely, like Kirk Herbstreit said, it got a little political, and I think definitely Alabama was one of those teams. Clemson is definitely one of those teams. Even playing in a weaker ACC, they got a very good program.
Right.
But when it comes down to Notre Dame, and I'll give Oklahoma the benefit out. I think they're a legitimate team that could be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But between Notre Dame and Georgia, that's a tough pill to swallow for Georgia fans and SEC fans. And we talked about this as well, the whole idea of SEC bias.
Yeah.
I think it's SEC fatigue. People are tired of seeing SEC teams in there. But you had that huge stat, and let you talk about it, of the recruiting and how that goes directly into how good these teams are. What does it look like on the recruiting front for the SEC, and why do people have this SEC fatigue?
Well, I think mainly, and you could use the argument that it's mainly been Bama as far as, SEC bias goes and SEC dominating college football. I think it's a pretty fair argument to say that Alabama's kind of been up top as far as, talent goes and winning championships. But I think you're starting to see Georgia come up there and being that team that competes with Alabama every year and been the team that only compete with Alabama for the past 2 years. And then, like I said to you earlier about recruiting, 10 of the top 25 recruiting rankings, if you go to team rankings on Rivals or 247, you'll see that 10 of the top 25 are from the SEC. 1 Bama, 2 A&M, 3 Georgia.
And that says something about the quality of the teams you're getting and why it translates exactly to that. I think, like you talk about A&M, they're an up-and-coming program with Jimbo Fisher. We saw they had a close loss to Clemson that they should have won.
28-26.
I mean, they should have won that game.
Yeah.
I felt they had that game. And that's a huge game. And then Alabama, they didn't lose to them that bad, but Alabama's a different machine, and they're a young team. And Kellen Mond is going to be a dynamic quarterback for that team. I think that you just take a look at the SEC as a whole. It's kind of bounced back this year. I feel like it evened out a little bit. People that complained about the East. Florida's got Dan Mullen there, up and coming. You take a look at Kentucky, what they did this year. A veteran team that had played together for 4 years. And, going into that Georgia game, there was a lot of hype surrounding Kentucky. And I think a lot of that might have been a little bit over the top for Kentucky. But, I mean, they had a good team. They had a good team. They finished 9-3, headed to a bowl game. And so a big bowl game. It's going to be fun for them, the Citrus Bowl. And so that's a big step for Mark Stoops and that program. And I think the SEC's taking a leap. Tennessee, I mean, Jeremy Pruitt, he seemed like that was a dumpster fire when he put you guys up.
Top 11 recruiting class.
Top 11 recruiting class. And also, you finished the season out pretty strong, too, with a couple big wins. And so the SEC as a whole has gotten better. But when you take a look at the country, I think and we're going to have this discussion as well about UCF. I think for Notre Dame to be able to legitimately, for me to look at them and say, okay, you earned your way into this playoff, join a conference.
Yeah,
I mean, they pretty much play. They play an ACC schedule with being in every other sport. But join the ACC, win your conference title. You have to play that stream because everyone else does, and then they have to do that. And so I think for the Power Five, that's interesting. When you get into the Group of Five, I've been on the side of UCF belongs nowhere near these teams. They could not hold Alabama or Georgia's jockstrap. It just would not happen. I do think, though, and this has brought up an argument as well. I was talking to someone, and they said, well, then what are they playing for? You've won 25 straight games. You've won 2 conference championships. Should the Group of 5 just make their own playoff system? Because then if they don't even get a shot, what are they actually playing for? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I just think you can't have a 108 strength of schedule.
Agreed,
I mean, you got to play somebody. And, the toughest games they're playing are their conference championships, and then you could say, oh, well, we beat Auburn team that was supposedly great. I mean, yeah, and I'm not going to use the excuse, oh, well, Auburn didn't care about that game and they didn't show up. Well, they had an unhealthy Kerryon Johnson in that game after getting beat up. And the Alabama game was unhealthy for the SEC championship game. And Auburn was still a great team. I'm not taking the win away from UCF, but if your toughest game is going to be the bowl game, I mean, because I don't even think they played a ranked team all year. So
they played a Cincinnati team and ended up
they were ranked 21, but we all know Cincinnati's not a powerhouse.
Yes,
in the country.
And this is also I was talking with the same person. We were talking, what Power 5 team is going to schedule them?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the problem UCF sits in because they can't go out and say, oh, we want to schedule Georgia for a home and home. Georgia's not going to do that because if they lose, it looks bad.
Yeah.
Clemson, I don't believe would do that. So they're going to.
Do I think we'd lose if we played them?
I don't think, but I'm saying the risk, is it worth that for UCF? And so it's an interesting debate, and that leads us right into the next thing. Do you think the playoff should expand? And if it does, what is the timetable for that? We've seen a lot of reports come out recently that they're going to have the committee's going to have a conversation about a 16 or an 18 playoff. But at what point is too much where you're letting everyone in?
Well, I don't think this should turn into March Madness and we put in like six. Obviously, you can't put in
64 teams.
But like, don't put in like 25 teams. Like, I don't think it should go to that. I think 7 or 8 is the very max you should go to. With getting a first round bye for the number 1 seed, or just doing 8 teams and 1, 8, 2, 7, 3, 6, 4, 5. I just think that's the best way to do it, and then take out conference championships, because when you have conference championships like the SEC championship deciding who goes to the playoff, I think it's just kind of bushling, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, because I think it takes away, and you said this on the ride over here actually, and I was like, I haven't heard that argument before, but you say that it kind of takes teams out of the running, because it ruins. Because say if Georgia does come in there undefeated, and Georgia loses the same way to Alabama, Georgia's sitting at what, 12-1?
Yeah.
With a 3-point loss to Alabama, or a 7-point loss to Alabama, and you're saying that they're not in the top 4. It acts as a playoff game, and I get that. So the argument is, well, you should win your games.
Well, then it gives teams like UCF a chance, because they're 7 seed. And so that gives them their actual chance to go and play a Clemson team, and let's see how they fare against a quality opponent.
Yeah.
And so I think it gives teams like that a chance. But, like, you got to think about it. These kids are in finals right now and preparing for, their rivalry games at that time, going into finals week. So, because these kids have lives, too. I mean, it's not like the NFL where all they do is just football. Like, they have to go to school. And I know they have tutors and they have a bunch of things that help out with that. But they're still kids, and they have to go to school and do all those things. So I think it's a little easy to say, well, let's just, take out conference championships and make them play 4 more games. Like, I mean, it shouldn't like really necessarily work like that. But I mean, I think if you're really wanting to get the best teams in the playoff, I think you should expand it to 8. And then you're going to be like, well, this number 9 or number 10 team is quality.
Well, there's always going to be an argument.
There's always going to be an argument.
You're right.
But I think there's a difference between elite and then your good teams, kind of like
even your great teams.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with you. I think Ohio State's one of those teams right now.
I think they could beat anybody in a playoff. I know Alabama's on a whole different level, and they're one of the best teams of all time. This team that they have right now, but I think Ohio State can very well compete with any team in the country. And I know they're one of the more inconsistent teams in the country, but I do think they have the talent to play with everybody, because I'm pretty sure they had like a top 5 recruiting class last year. So, and a Heisman candidate quarterback.
Will Manis comments. Will Manis was supposed to be on the show today. He said UCF played Memphis twice and beat them twice. # respect for UCF. They did. Respect. And Mackenzie Milton, fantastic football player.
Oh,
Whether
absolutely.
it's a group of 5, FCS, whatever it is he's playing.
Yeah.
Obviously he's playing group of 5, but whatever level, the kid's a great football player. And prayers go out to him for his injury that he had and everything, and as he begins a tough road to recovery. But, I mean, watching I didn't get to watch a lot of that conference championship game. I was keeping up with it, but they came back and won a game and were down a lot at one point. And so I think that's something with a backup QB, and that's going to be interesting. They face off against LSU. And that's going to be an interesting bowl. LSU, there's a lot of calls on social media for teams to say, well, I don't want an LSU Auburn. Let's beat that group of 5 team.
And I think UCF's a good matchup for LSU. LSU obviously agreed on their best DB. I think UCF has a perfect offense to go, a defense like LSU that can out. They got speed on, so I mean, because they're going to want to claim another national championship. So this game is everything to UCF. When for LSU, it's not going to mean as much, and that's just how it is. You can say that's bias, that's bullcrap. But honestly, LSU is not going to care about this game as much as UCF, as you saw UCF claim a national championship for beating a 3-loss Auburn team.
In the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl.
In the Peach Bowl.
I mean, and that's no disrespect to the Peach Bowl. Great game. Florida, Michigan are heading.
But you ain't going to see Auburn claim a national championship for beating UCF.
No, I agree. For the group of 5 team, this is their shot. And we saw it it's not more than a couple years ago, but Boise State was like that.
Yeah.
And, I think one thing that teams are wary of when I went back is who really wants to schedule a home and home with UCF? We saw, or even a neutral site game as a power time. We saw that with Georgia and Boise State. Now, is that Georgia team maybe not one of the strongest teams, but they ran off a bunch of wins after that loss to Boise State after losing the opening. Kellen Moore.
Kellen Moore.
He was a dynamic quarterback for the Boise State team, and those awful uniforms that Georgia had to wear. Those Power Rangers versus the Stormtroopers.
I wasn't that much of a
That was awful. Gosh, it was so bad. I liked it. The silver helmets were cool that Georgia wore, but those red and black Power Rangers.
That's what everybody calls them.
Yeah, the Power Rangers versus the Stormtroopers. Because
my opinion is, if I had to wear those, I think they'd be sick.
Matthew would look really good. Comment below if you think Matthew would look good in the all-red Georgia uniform. We need to get somebody on that pronto. Will Manis says UCF 31, LSU 21. And I agree. I think that's a good matchup. Maybe not the exact score, but I think it's going to be a good
We have a
game.
mediocre offense. LSU, so you're basically banking on their defense to kind of keep them in the game, and but without Mackenzie Milton,
how would this freshman step up? I
would take LSU in the game. But if Mackenzie Milton were healthy, I think just like they did with Auburn game, that was their national championship, so they have a lot to play for. And so I think if Mackenzie Milton is healthy, I know we're playing the what-if game, I would take UCF to win that game just because of how their offense can spread you out. They're very fast-paced, and I know LSU's defense is a great defense, but it's different when you're going against SEC opponents that want to run the ball down your throat and, not kind of spread you out as much as UCF does with the hurry-up offense.
Trent Griner from down in Moultrie, Georgia says, that's my roommate, good friend of mine, Trent Griner, near Colquitt County, and I don't know if they won the state championship last night. Don't remember. Trent can throw that in the comments, but they played last night at the Mercedes-Benz. And talk about, as we switch from this whole college football playoff conversation to recruiting. Early signing day is next Wednesday.
Yep,
it's a big day. And I think what is really cool I've had the opportunity to cover last year's and we'll do this year's as well. But looking at that is going to be very interesting because you talk to coaches and guys that do this for a living. How does this early national signing day? And I was talking with Ben Moore, covers Georgia State with 24/7 Sports, and he was saying this is an interesting conversation because it almost forces Power 5 teams to offer these kids earlier.
Yeah.
So because Group of 5 schools can pick them up. For example, Georgia State signed a kid, an offensive lineman that had an offer from Clemson, but Clemson was kind of wary on where the offer was going to go or not. Well, and before they changed the signing period, they would have the full cycle to do this. Well, now he's going to sign next Wednesday with Georgia State and go ahead and take that, whereas he was unsure on what Clemson would do. And so I think it's an interesting change. This is the second year they've done this. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what guys, we know the number one recruit, Nolan Smith, reaffirmed his commitment after pretty much playing with everybody's feelings on Twitter with all his visits. But, talking with some guys, why would you not take your 5 official visits? I mean, essentially someone's saying, Matthew, I'll pay you to come take pictures in a cool uniform to show you around the entire facilities and all this stuff and get your family to fly out here for free. Take them. I mean, if you're a high school kid, take those 5 visits.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're committed or not. But what do you think? You think any big surprises on National Signing Day? You talking about some guys beforehand. Any predictions for you of who's going to go where?
I think I'm just sticking in the SEC just because, I'm a big Georgia fan. I follow Georgia football pretty hard. I think guys to look forward to Kobe Dean, Evan Neal, 5-star offensive lineman, Trey Sanders.
Alabama and Georgia, that's going to be a big one.
Yep, Trey Sanders, Alabama, Georgia, number 1 overall running back in the class. So I think you'd see a lot of Alabama, Georgia recruiting battles with Georgia winning a big one, and Clay Webb and a 5-star center out of Alabama. I'm trying to think of the city he's from.
Well, that's also the second straight, the number 1 player out of Alabama has left the state. And so that's interesting, too. Not to say that Nick Saban's losing it because he's doing very well.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see, that Clay Webb's going to be going to Georgia next year. I think as well, you take a look at what early signing day does. It allows these kids to kind of go ahead and get it out of the way, which I know is a big thing for some of them. Also early
go and get in the system, practicing with the team so they can figure out the playbook. Because that gives players a big head start, going into spring practice and, summer practice. I mean, that gives kids a big head start because, guys like Big Cleveland did it. Justin Fields did it, even though he's got an amazing quarterback and Jake Fromm ahead of him. But getting that head start and getting in front of the playbook that early, I think that's just a huge advantage for those players.
You talked about getting that advantage. I mean, they're going to graduate high school in December.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Fields is a prime example. Practiced with Georgia throughout the national championship practicing.
Yeah.
Wow. How valuable is that? I mean, I know
For
it's just practice.
Jalen Hurts.
For Jalen Hurts.
Scored 0 points
Yeah.
and then beats us next year. So, I mean, what the heck?
Exactly. Wow, yeah, that was a tough pill to swallow for Georgia fans all around. I think, though, early signing period is going to bring us some excitement next Wednesday, and then obviously the one in February.
Right.
It's going to be the national sign day, the one everyone knows and loves, a holiday, essentially,
It is a holiday.
for college football and recruiting fans. I know it's crazy to think that we, drool over these 17, 18-year-olds that are just putting a pen to paper and we're hoping they come to our school, but it's definitely a phenomenon that's going to be really tuned into on that day, and we're going to provide you some updates as well, probably even do a show just recapping that next week. It's going to be very big and some big recruits, and we talked about this last night with Will Manis. He was not able to be on the show once again, but how recruiting translates to talent on the field. And this is an interesting conversation that you and Will had, and I'll let you just open the floor with it, but recruiting to me, if you look at who's had consistency, was the biggest thing that you said. Consistently being there. And I think Alabama has proved that. Georgia's starting to get there.
Yeah.
I think over the past 3 to 4 years they've had top 10 recruiting classes. And under Mark Richt they had a lot.
Yeah.
But when you see the elite programs that are in the college football playoff, it translates directly to recruiting and the consistency of how long they're there. Well before they have that run of dominance.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you talk about who are some teams that you feel don't quite are on the cusp that could maybe do a little bit better. I know one of them, and this is going to make a lot of fans here in the Columbus area mad. But go ahead.
But I think Auburn obviously is one. I know Gus has had top 10, top 15 recruiting classes, and like I said, I talked with Will about this last night. But I think actually developing players and bringing out the best in them with their talent and their set of skills, bringing that to the table and making your team the best as possible. I think Gus Malzahn has a good system, but I think it's only good for teams until you get to ones like Alabama. Because Kirby Smart and Nick Saban are going to figure out that high school offense with the 10 plays that he runs, and then he does those trick plays in the first and second quarter, and then the second half it's figured out he has nothing else to run. So I think it's a smart system, but it's not broad enough. I think you have a set number of plays to run, and once you're done, it's just like, well, what the heck do I do? And I think that's starting. I think it's starting to show, and it's a tricky offense. People don't like going against it. Just like Georgia Tech. I know Georgia Tech is 7-5. They're a good football team, but defenses don't like going up against it because it's tricky, and you are so fatigued by the end of the game because you're constantly going and running, and just like Auburn's offense, they spread you out. They're sending people in motion all the time on every play, slots. I mean, running backs. I mean, people are constantly going in different directions. But as far as competing at an elite level, I think that's what Auburn is missing. And like I was talking to you and Will last night, I think it'd be a shot in the dark. But I think like Adele McGee, he's the number one recruiter in the country right now. Running backs coach for Georgia. You're getting 5-star after 5-star after 5-star, and you see the players that are being developed, like Todd Gurley, who came through Georgia, Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, now DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield. I mean, stats speak for itself. I mean, you got Todd Gurley starting running back for the Rams, Nick Chubb starting running back for the Browns, Sonny Michel starting running back for the New England Patriots. I mean, numbers don't lie. And so I think when you put that into perspective, you're like, okay, this guy can recruit, and you see that they can develop players. And he's already been able to learn under Kirby Smart and his system and his blueprint how to establish a culture and how to get players to buy into the system and to build that after building the culture and now implementing the system and making your team believe that we can win championships. And I think Del McGee would be able to do that after being at Georgia for a certain amount of time and seeing the recruiting that he's done. And he graduated from Auburn.
Yeah.
So he knows the area. So I think that'd be a home run hire. Do I want to see Del McGee go? Absolutely not. But I think that Auburn needs to look for that kind of a hire. I'm not saying Gus Malzahn isn't a good coach, but in order to get over the hump to the level that Alabama and now Georgia's heading to, I think that's what they got to do.
We're going to put it on a Twitter poll later, but is Gus Malzahn Auburn's version of Mark Richt?
Yeah.
Is he? Is he the guy that can take them there. Will Mannis wants to offer some. He goes, Michelle doesn't start. James White starts for New England. Maybe on your fantasy team, Will. Maybe on your fantasy team he does.
That's not true.
But I do agree with you. I think the consistency in the recruiting rankings leads to talent. But there has to be something in the middle. Right. You can have all this talent, but if you don't develop. And one thing I think, and Auburn sticks out as a team like this, is Auburn fans, who have they developed as a quarterback?
Exactly.
I mean, I used to be a diehard Auburn fan. 2004, the glory years of Auburn football. Jason Campbell, Carnell Cadillac Williams, Ronnie Brown, a dominant offense that robbed of a BCS national championship appearance against USC. But you're telling me that's the last guy that's been in the system. Now, Will Mannis will say Chris Todd. Okay, sure. But seriously, Cam Newton, JUCO.
Yeah.
Nick Marshall, the guy you went to the national championship with against Florida State, was a converted defensive back. And that just says something about the talent you had there. They had Jeremy Johnson, who I know was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He was a 5-star for a reason. Something happened there with the development of him. And sometimes that can be on the player, and sometimes it can be on the coaches, but something's missing there, I think, from their perspective. And so what's happening there? Auburn has had, Kyle Frazier, who's supposed to be the savior coming in. I mean, didn't do a lot. There's been a lot of – I think it's something that they're going to have to look at and see what happens, because it's interesting. As Will Mannis is just blowing up the comment section right now, he said Nick Marshall, if you check the stats from 2013 and 2014, he vastly improves. And he might, but I'm just saying, from a talent perspective, when you recruit quarterbacks to play quarterback.
And they did get to a national championship.
Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong.
But they had to have a couple miracles go their way that year.
Yeah, don't talk about it.
As we all saw.
That was rough.
I'm saying consistently playing year in and year out, just like Georgia's starting to do and Alabama's been doing for the past 7 years, winning national championship after national championship and missing it by getting a kickoff or a field goal, missing a field goal and getting it ran back, and Auburn go to the national championship. So, but they're always playing for that national championship every year. And I think to get to that level, you got to get somebody that can recruit a top 5 recruiting class every year and learn how to develop players and get them in that championship mode. So I think that's where it's a big shift change when you used to talk about Georgia and Alabama and Clemson. I'm going to put Clemson in that category because they've obviously won more than us, and they've been there since 2015 with Deshaun Watson. So those 3 teams, I think that's a championship culture that these players are buying into. And I think that's what these other teams like Jimbo Fisher at A&M, establishing a culture and get kids to buy into a system and say, if you want to come beat Bama, join in and let's hop on.
And Fisher's a guy that knows what it takes to win a national championship. 2013 beat that same Auburn squad with Jameis Winston and company. I think you're right. You have coaches all across the nation. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Ohio State with Urban Meyer retiring. We'll see. Jim Harbaugh, can Michigan ever get over the hump? Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, he's got his best shot that he's had since 2012 to win a national title. Now being in the playoff after they got smacked by Alabama that year, it was just should not have been there. That's the BCS though. It's over. The BCS is over. Thank the Lord. Computer rankings are done. But I agree with you. I think all of this talk around, and it all kind of circles recruiting, with next week being a big week and this kind of being to see bowl games starting to kick off. It really begs different. Okay. You look at these recruits, where are they now? And some of the top guys, and they're at the top tier schools, like that are in the top 6. You got a team like Oklahoma, who their offense is dynamic. They have 3
5-star wide receiver commits in this current class right now,
and that's crazy. And
they're just building it,
and they're building it. If their defense, and this is no disrespect to Oklahoma fans or Big 12 fans, they don't play a ton of defense over there.
It's 7-on-7.
It's 7-on-7 football.
That's what I call it.
Don't take him with Kyler Murray.
He's still insane.
He's a great football player. Go play baseball. That is where you will make your money. Play baseball. Everyone's saying that.
Yeah.
But I think just seeing why these teams are where they are. I mean, Alabama consistently top 5 recruiting class for the past 10 years.
Number 1,
they had to
number
do it
2.
Before. They had to top 3. 1 or 2. Georgia. Ever since Kirby's gotten there, they've had
been top 5.
Top 5, and you're seeing. Last year they went to the national championship. This year they're 1 game away from the playoff, arguably a playoff game they played in Mercedes-Benz. They're getting there. Clemson's there. Dabo has built a powerhouse after several years.
Absolutely.
And kind of getting his own system players in there. And I think you look at the elite coaches around college football, and when you talk about these elite coaching staffs, and you talked about Adele McGee, you also have guys that are leaving schools to go other places. That's one thing that Kirby Smart talked about in his press conference with Mel Tucker leaving to take the job at Colorado.
Yeah.
You see, when you have an elite coaching staff, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Alabama's offensive coordinator also, he left. I think it's interesting. Will Mannis is commenting once again. I'm pretty sure none of the Big 12 teams played a single play this season with only 7 players on the field.
I mean, yeah.
You're correct in that. Might as well be. But I think you see the elite coaches where they're going, and you see a guy like Nick Saban. He's got coaches here. He's got coaches there. I mean, you just.
Well, I think another credit to Dabo. You know, they had Deshaun Watson there for 3 years, and the system that they kind of had on offense with him, and now Trevor Lawrence. It's kind of different as far as QB style goes. I know he can run a little bit, but they didn't miss a beat when Trevor Lawrence came in there. And I know Kelly Bryant was their guy for last year, and they made it to the playoff. And they turned to Trevor Lawrence, who they feel like has a better style of play, more talent. They don't miss that beat. I mean, they're undefeated going into a playoff game with Notre Dame, which I think Notre Dame does play them well in the playoff, simply because Clemson hadn't had a schedule all year.
Yeah, Clemson, the ACC has been a down year, obviously.
And you saw that game with A&M where it came down to the wire.
And that was a good game.
Exactly.
And A&M has an underrated defense, I feel.
And don't get me wrong, Clemson's way more talented than Notre Dame on both sides of the ball. Defense, the entire defensive line is projected first-rounders with, a top freshman in the country at Trevor Lawrence at QB. And then with the running back, Etienne, or I forgot how to pronounce his name, but with a stellar running back. And great wideouts in Justin Ross and T. Higgins.
Local product Justin Ross.
So, I mean, they are talented all across the board. So, I think they beat Notre Dame, absolutely. I think Notre Dame plays them tough. But I'll be interested to see how well they play Alabama. I think they'll play them well, just because how deep they are on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, that defensive line is going to have their work cut out for them. But, like you said, all for first round talent.
And then you have almost all Americans on Alabama's offensive line. I mean, that's just one of the best teams I think I've ever seen, and especially with Quentin Williams, a 3-star recruit, who is probably the best defensive lineman in the country, and he'll be a top 3, top 5 pick in the draft. I mean, I think he's insane. I hope you go to the Falcons, buddy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for all you did. Keep playing your Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, but I think I do think Clemson is going to be able to compete with Bama whenever they play them. I'm not saying Oklahoma doesn't have a shot, but I'm also saying Oklahoma doesn't have a shot when they play Alabama.
Kyler Murray's an electric player, and he won the Heisman for a reason, but
I honestly
this is a different animal.
Alabama could score 80 points at will.
That's the thing. Alabama can go in there and say, okay, you want to do that? We'll do the same thing, but we'll have a better defense.
Exactly. I think they can get more stops than Oklahoma's defense. But, Trevor Knight at Oklahoma, when they played in the Sugar Bowl, I think it was in 2008.
14.
Or was it 14?
2014, yes.
Okay, wow, that was awful.
2008.
But when they played in the Sugar Bowl, Trevor Knight, Oklahoma, they played them well, and they beat them. And then you saw Alabama, whenever they play teams that have quarterbacks that spread them out, like Deshaun Watson did 2 years after that or a year after that, caused problems and eventually lost. So I think that now that they are going up against another running quarterback in Kyler Murray and who can spread them out with some good wideouts in CeeDee Lamb and Marquise Brown, I think they could spread them out and kind of do some damage. But I still don't think they win the game, but I do think they can compete with them at a high level.
Well, we're going to have a prediction show where we lay out a whole bracket for you. We're going to have a nice little panel that's going to talk about specifically that college football playoff that kicks off on December 29th. It's going to be fun. It's going to be an interesting weekend of college football. And the great bowl games start tuning in that are all around that weekend. Sugar Bowl, Georgia plays Texas, which is going to be interesting and a fun game. LSU, UCF, like we talked about. A lot of good games. Ohio State, Washington.
That's going to be a good game.
That's good. Some good games. And I know a lot of Georgia fans, they wanted that Ohio State matchup. They wanted that Georgia-Ohio State. That would have been great.
That or UCF. I'd love to play either one of those teams.
But I think it's been a good season. It's crazy to think it, though. We're nearing the end of another college football season.
It's crazy.
It went by so fast. But, yeah, I mean, we're going to have a show on the college football playoff here soon. Thanks for coming. And join us here. Once again, we're at Cook's Hot Dogs here in Columbus, Georgia. It's a great location. Come and get you some 1950 scrambled dogs. And throw it out there. Yeah.
Throwing Dinglewood under the bus.
In Columbus. But thanks for tuning in. One thing, Alabama is going to lose, according to Will Mannis, 45-42. Will, we will have you on the show next time to give all your hot takes.
We call Will
as
Skip.
well as Will does very often. But thank you for tuning in once again. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow on all social media. And once again, if you're watching this on Facebook Live, thanks for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, the recap of it, thank you. And if you're just listening to it on the car, in the car on the way home or on the way to your family Christmas party as well, thank you for tuning in on iTunes. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.